Hey everyone, in English 1301, it's Dr. E, and I just wanted to provide you with an instructional video for your paper portfolio assignment. So this will be due towards the end of the semester, and what I want you to do is to think of this kind of as our final paper. So instead of following that typical pattern of, okay, we're going to do the research, we're going to write the final paper, and we're going to submit it, we're kind of throwing that out the window and instead using a portfolio assignment, and that's something that a lot of writing classes do. And what's involved in this is taking some of the past writing that you've done, compiling it, putting it together in a single document, reworking it, adding things where necessary, thinking about some of your ideas perhaps in a new way, and then submitting that just to kind of show, hey, this is the work that I've done. Okay, so I don't want you to be overwhelmed by this notion of, okay, now I have to write something else. We write a lot every week. It's the nature of an online course generally. It's definitely the nature of an online writing course. So we've done a lot of work and it should not go to waste. Believe me, I don't see any of your work as a waste, but I think there's something that's really valuable and gained in going back to some of your original posts and reworking them a little bit. And we'll follow the pattern of we'll compile those paper topics. So I want you to think about these are just the paper topic discussion posts. Okay, so if you go back in the weeks, we haven't done a ton of them, but I want you to choose 3 that were interesting or exciting or something that you would just kind of like to think about again. And we're going to choose those posts that you originally submitted, and you'll essentially just put them all into a single document. We're going to get into groups and peer review those together. You're going to submit your draft to me. Okay. Once I have your draft, I'm going to go over it and give you feedback. I'm just another set of eyes like the peer review process. And then once I give you your feedback, you and I are going to meet one-on-one in a WebEx consultation. So if you look at the syllabus, you'll notice that I believe it's the week before Thanksgiving this semester. We essentially aren't doing our typical posts writing. You and I are going to meet. So I have to schedule meetings with every single one of you in every single one of my classes. And those will be times of your choosing. So if you have a weird work schedule, I'm going to try to have some times throughout the day and throughout the week so that you and I can meet. You will have some time to look at my feedback before then. So essentially my expectation is that you are going to have my feedback in front of you. I'm going to have my feedback up on the screen, and you can tell me what questions or concerns you have. This is not meant to be something that makes you nervous or anxious. This is just a conversation. This is just a way for you to make sure that you follow what I put in your feedback, because maybe it's confusing, and to ask any kinds of questions that you have. So you see, we're going through all of these steps before submitting that final grade, which is the bigger grade. So after you meet with me, you'll do any revisions and edits, and you'll submit your final version. Okay, but what I want to do right now, and I'll keep talking about this, and this will definitely be something that I address more in our videos as we get closer to these assignments, but I just want to get to some of the basics, okay? So I'm going to pull up the rubric and guidelines, which have been posted in the content area of D2L. And so when I show you this, it's just the same kind of formatting as we've seen in all of our other assignments in terms of a rubric. On the left-hand side is the criteria, right? So we want to make sure that we have our thesis set up, that we're focused, that our content is effective, that we have everything organized. Sources and documenting, y'all, is going to be a big one. We need to make sure that as we have continued to kind of practice and work with MLA and using quotes and using sources, that we're doing that correctly. And then, of course, grammar, punctuation, and spelling. And one thing we're going to add, so yes, we're going through and we're reworking some of our previous posts, but for each of those posts, you need an abstract paragraph. In academia, abstract essentially just means kind of almost a summary. So in some articles, you'll see before the article even begins, in italics before, there's like a paragraph that essentially gives what we call an abstract. It summarizes some of the ideas. It kind of gives the audience some context about what they're going to read. And so I want you to do this for each of your paper topics. I want you to go back and think about, when I originally wrote this, I was thinking this, now I may be thinking differently, or now I've learned something about my writing or something about the way that I was using quotes that I need to change. So it's really just you giving your audience some context about that particular paper topic post, right? How long did it take you to revise it? You know, what's something that changed or influenced you? So each of your entries will need to include an abstract paragraph. I'll show you what I'm talking about, okay? So I want you to, when you have some time, take a look at these different kinds of categories. Yes, we should be sticking in this column. There's no reason for us to be striving for the does not meet expectations column. So just imagine that I have this in front of me when I'm going to grade your final work, and I want to be circling in this column. Maybe some in the meets expectations, you know, some in here. But if I'm circling mostly in this column, that means you're going to get, you know, an A, right? If I'm in this column and maybe circling a few and meets expectations, you know, that may end up being a low A, high B, that kind of thing, okay? We should not be striving for either of these columns, right? But I need to put those just, you know, to give you some information so that when you go back and look at your work before you submit the final version, you have an understanding of how they will be graded, okay? I'm going to scroll to the second page. There are a lot of words on the screen. Don't read them all right now. It's okay. This is just kind of giving some of the guidelines that I've talked through a bit already. So essentially this is going back to those paper topic discussion posts. So not our writing posts, not our reading posts, going back to those weeks when we actually had a paper topic post. And I want you to choose 3 of those. Out of, you know, those 3, you'll need to work with each of them individually. You're going to revise them, edit them. You're going to put them together in a single document, right? And it needs to be in one of these formats. I've been saying this throughout the semester, right? I can't grade anything outside of these formats, okay? We'll go through and we'll peer review them in the discussion area, and you'll go through the, you know, the consultations with me, and then you'll submit the final version towards the end of the semester. Okay, I note that much of the time is going to be, you know, the revision process. You're going to take your original post, but you will have to rethink it. You might have to go back and add research. You might have to go back and double check your research to make sure it's correct or that you followed MLA formatting. You may need to rewrite in sections because, you know, maybe that week you were writing really quickly, you were on a deadline and you submitted before really working to revise and edit. So these should not be exactly the same as they first appear, right? These should be more advanced. These should be more well written. And that is not to say that any of you have submitted things that are not well written. It's to say that now we have time and we're going to work and rework and peer review and go through all these steps. So by the end point, you know, it should not be exactly the same as it first appears. There's just no way, okay? So I want you to note that typically resubmitting your own work in a class, that's considered plagiarism. That's not something that we typically allow in academia, but this is something I'm giving you permission to do. That's the nature of a portfolio. It's these things that we're going back and reworking. So just know that because we're doing it in this class does not mean you should do this in any other classes, and it doesn't mean that you should do it in this class for any other assignment unless I give you that kind of go ahead. Just to be on the safe side, we want to avoid plagiarism at all costs, right? That there can be some severe consequences there, okay? So we want to make sure that we're effectively communicating. And I put, you know, I know people in different jobs and business environments, entrepreneur, education, who will not even send an email to groups of colleagues or bosses without taking the time to revise work. So again, that peer review process is going to become really important, and it's one that I hope you take with you for everything that you work on in an academic circle. So even if you're not put into peer review groups in other classes that require writing, then go to a tutoring session. Sign up for an online tutoring session. I've put a link down here to do that. Get another set of eyes on your work. Don't just submit something, because we each write in different ways and we have these kinds of writing quirks. I do, definitely. I've been doing this a long time and I have a lot of quirks with my writing. So I know that I need to send my work to other people before I send it to my boss, or, you know, if I am trying to submit an article for publication or any of those kinds of things. We should not just, you know, quickly send off our work right after we get finished. We need to take some time to go through these processes, right? So the portfolio needs to include 3 paper topic discussion posts from the semester. Each entry needs to be at least 3 paragraphs. It may be a bit longer depending on the original requirements for the assignment. It may be shorter and you need to then go in and add some information, you know, show us what you know, show us what you learned. And each entry needs to include at least one source, right? So think of Choi's article, Lee's video, any of those things about food we've covered in the class, because they should all kind of come together around the subtopic at least of food in some way. Each entry needs to include an abstract paragraph. That's going to be in italics, right? So it's going to be leaning over. So it stands out on the page, and we know that it's a little bit different from your actual entry. And that abstract is just meant to give some audience context, right? So, you know, what were you originally thinking when you wrote it? Did you need to rework it in a heavy way, or was it a light, revision? Do you think differently about the topic? What kind of revisions should you do? That's around 4 to 5 sentences, and everyone's is a little different. So there's no, specific thing I'm looking for. I'm just looking for you to give us some context about what you were thinking and what you're writing about in this particular week. The portfolio needs to, of course, follow MLA guidelines. And at the very end of the document, after all of your abstracts and week, and your revisions for each post, there needs to be a works cited page. Okay, so with 3 posts, you need at least 3 entries in your works cited page. You've worked on some of this stuff with the annotation exercises, right? So some of this you will already have a citation for Choi's work, right? So maybe you should choose a discussion post topic from that week where we talked about Choi's work, because you've already done some of that MLA work ahead of time. I've put a link here for the Purdue OWL site for all that MLA information. You'll need to submit your portfolio to D2L just like any other assignment. You'll submit the draft to me before our consultations in D2L, and then you'll submit the final version in D2L assignments as well, okay? I definitely say, make a tutoring appointment. If not for this class, the Center for Reading and Writing will help you with any writing for any class. It doesn't have to be English specific. Okay, what I want to do right now is to show you kind of an example, right? Because sometimes this doesn't make sense until you see it. And so I'm going to post a very general template on D2L, which I've done in the past to try to make sure that everything is MLA formatted. I'm going to show you an example portfolio that was submitted to a literature class, right? But I want you to see what it looks like, okay? So if you look at this document, and I'm not going to post this on D2L just because it's somebody else's work, but this is where you're going to see it. So you'll notice that it is MLA formatted according to guidelines, last name, page number, etc. General title of paper portfolio, this is just generic title, nothing's fancy. There's no title page. That's not required in MLA anymore. You'll notice that this first paragraph is in italics, right? It is, you got that little lean to it. And this is written in the first person. This author is just talking about, I was interested in this. I chose to do this with my writing. I originally thought this, right? You can add, like, how long did it take you to do revisions? Anything that gives us a little bit of background on your writing is going to be great. And again, only 4 to 5 sentences. Right after this begins the paper topic post. You'll notice it's not italicized anymore, it's indented, but I can see the difference between this abstract paragraph and then the beginning of the actual paper topic post that has been revised, okay? So this is what essentially it should look like. I'm going to scroll down so you can see where the second one begins, okay? So you'll see there's just a space, and then she begins her second entry. So we have, again, a paragraph that's italicized. The requirements were a little bit different. You need 4 to 5 sentences. And then she then starts, her paper topic post. Okay, I'm going to scroll down. And then we have a space. We get to the third abstract before the third entry. Okay, so I just want you to know how it kind of looks on the page. And then finally, I'm going to scroll down to the very end, and we get to a works cited page, okay? So you notice, the first line of every entry is left justified. If there are second lines, they are indented with that hanging indent. Okay, that's pretty important. There's a setup out of our the literature book, so it's going to look a little bit different than ours for our class, but I just want you to kind of get a sense of what it looks like on the page, okay? I'm going to provide more information as we get closer to this assignment, but this is just the general kind of what to expect and where we're going. I want you to start looking back at your paper topic posts and see which ones you might want to work with again, and let me know in the Q&A area of the discussion board if you have any questions or concerns. All right, take care, good luck. This is easy peasy.